Welcome back to the Features Talk podcast, where we are making vehicle technology simple and relevant for everyday drivers. And that happens to be a lot of us. And so there's many people tuning in. And so I am so excited to be here today again for episode 2 of our mini series. And joining me, as always, is my co-host and our product specialist, Luke Verseput. Welcome back,
Hello.
Luke.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love getting into this mini series. It's been cool having a little more of a condensed format. Um and we haven't done like super long, hours long episodes before, but it's a little more condensed compared to what we're used to. And the nice thing about this is it's the same reason people like, TV shows. And it's that it's more condensed experiences, but we're covering like an overall
Yes.
larger topic. And what we're covering now is, modern safety standards. Surprise, surprise, we're talking about safety standards. But what we're focusing on now are how those safety standards are changing in modern times and with more modern cars and their modern technology. So last week we were breaking down, or last episode we broke down the Euro NCAP
Mhm.
2026 overhaul.
Mhm.
And Euro NCAP meaning European New Car
Assess-
new car assessment program. That's right. There
Mhm.
are many acronyms out there.
I
So,
know.
so the European New Car Assessment Program.
Mhm.
Now, the reason we cover that is because the changes there have a lot of implications,
Yeah.
even to us here in the United States. And so today, now in our next mini-series episode, we're actually crossing all the way over the Atlantic and we're bringing it back home now to the American standard
That's
of
right.
safety and seeing how these compare and seeing what is specifically like right here on our home turf. What are the safety standards set in place now, and how do our current cars, or maybe even our just recently passed cars, measuring up to that or not measuring up to that?
Yeah. And I think it's super important because, yes, we talked about Euro and now we're coming back to what the United States is doing. And if you do pay attention to the way that policy is put forth in Europe, and then if you compare that to the United States, there is a drastic difference. And
Mhm.
you could be honest about that. And so I'm glad that we're able to cover this. And it feeds into what we talked about last week, which is this perspective shift that vehicles
Mhm.
are now being graded on how well they avoid the collision altogether. And
Yeah.
so that is why we're breaking this down, is because the advanced technologies that we are seeing now when we go and purchase vehicles, or if you're a fleet, or if you are a rental car company, right? You're looking at what vehicles to look at. You are now looking at more advanced computers. And so
Mhm.
understanding how those computers are being put together, what's the regulation behind it, that is what we're doing in this series. And so I'm super excited to talk today about what we said. It was a very long acronym, FMVSS 127. Now, what does
Now
that
say
stand
that we'll say that 5 times fast. So
And this is why at the beginning of these series, we are choosing to spend a few moments going over some basic terms, right? So it really stands for Federal Motor Vehicle Safety. So that lets you know who's doing it. And then the standard is 127. So if you were ever curious about how to look that up, that is what you would use. And that would be the organization or the entity that actually created that standard. And
Mhm.
so we're also highlighting this month, which is Distracted Driving Awareness Month, right? And
Oh, yeah.
so this rule right here is one that I believe every American driver needs to know. And according to NHTSA, this particular standard is going to it's estimated that it is going to save at least 362 lives and prevent
Wow.
over 24,000 non-fatal injuries every single year. I mean, that is really significant, Luke.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That's one of the you touched on it here, and we did focus on it a lot more last week as kind of one of the main core principles of this miniseries is that the safety ratings on cars are no longer being done in a manner of that as it's been done for decades. Like,
Mhm.
well, we assume the crash is going to happen because
Right.
human beings are imperfect; they'll make mistakes. Of course, there's going to be a crash. because cars crash. That's what they do. So how safe will it be when the crash inevitably happens? No more though.
Right.
Now, as you said, now the safety rating is there's no longer an assumption that the crash should just happen.
Yep.
Now it's to the point where how do we rate cars on, like you said, how can they avoid it altogether?
Mm-hmm.
Unthinkable in certain in decades past, but now that's the way of it now.
Yeah, 100%.
And those are big numbers to be pulling each year if that and what that pans out.
And sometimes I feel like even when you hear numbers like that, like it's going to save 362 lives and 24,000, when often when you don't have a connection to that, you have people that have lost people on the road. So those numbers, even
Yes.
one person saved, is huge. And so that is another important aspect that we want to bring to the series, is to let you know that these numbers represent people, pedestrian, they represent us. And so it's so important that we understand that connection too when we're seeing this advanced vehicle technology, because we've talked about this many a times. The reason is to improve the safety on the roads for you, for pedestrians, for cyclists, everybody who's moving around. And so, but before we dive too deep into it, let's just go over a few basic terms that I think will help the listeners, navigate this particular episode that we're going to do today. And so we'll dive a little bit more into the FMVSS, but we've said NHTSA before. But for our listeners, NHTSA is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Okay, so this is a federal agency who is responsible for vehicle safety standards in the United States. Yeah, they are actually responsible for putting out the recalls. So if your car has a recall, you can go on NHTSA and you can look at that information. And so this is a very important federal agency that we discuss all the time. We track what they're doing because it affects us, it affects the drivers.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next term. I don't want to do the pedestrian first, but we are going to talk about it. Automatic emergency braking. Pretty common, technology amongst drivers. Like if you have a license, you know about automatic emergency braking. But we're going to talk about how it's become a little bit more advanced. It is an ADAS feature, so it is a driver assistance system, right? And it detects an imminent collision. And if it detects a collision is going to happen, it automatically applies the brakes without your input. So if that system knows that there's going to be a collision between you and someone else, it's going to step in and potentially save your life.
Yeah, there have already been a lot of numbers. I don't actually have them in front of me, so I'm not gonna make any up if I don't have it in front of me. But that one has been proven to save probably more lives than any other safety feature. I mean, I guess outside of like 3-point safety belts or airbags, which are. But as far as ADAS features, that one has probably been the most impactful. But as you said, that has advanced quite a lot over the years. And now there's another subcategory of that called pedestrian automatic emergency braking. And that is where it feels weird to call it traditional, but the more regular automatic emergency braking is more advanced and can detect the shape and movement of pedestrians, just a person or a cyclist crossing the road or whatever the case. And it can also apply the brakes automatically to prevent a collision with that individual. And to us, it seems obvious. Well, when driving a car, just don't hit the thing in front of you, because we think, we think and know that on a human level, but machines don't know the difference. It's actually way more advanced than most people think to teach a machine the difference between a big giant object in front, like the back of a car, versus a person walking. And so the fact that is now part of this motor safety, the motor vehicle safety standard, is the pedestrian subsection of that, is very important.
Yeah, and here's the thing: the technology has to actually perform in complete darkness. We will get into that later, but that is huge. I mean, driving at night in very dark areas, so you cannot see. How many of us are driving on the road and it's pitch black? and a deer runs in front of your car. And so this technology will be able to see in complete darkness, and I think that is pretty wild and amazing. We've also got sensor fusion. So this is really the combination of cameras and radar, right? And LiDAR, and they're working together to give the vehicle a complete picture of its surroundings. So how will it see in complete darkness? The sensor fusion. All of that will be working together in your vehicle. And then we get to FMVSS, which is Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard, and the number is 127. And
Yep.
what that specifically is mandating is that it is requiring automatic emergency braking, pedestrian automatic emergency braking, and
Both of them.
forward collision warning on every light vehicle sold in the United States. So this is
Yep.
now standard, right? So you will not have to ask for these features as an upgrade. This will now become standard on every light vehicle sold. And I think that that is important to track. You can track the movement of some of these driver assistance systems, and as they move through regulation, as they are tested and tried in R&D and proven, they move to regulation, and then they become standard.
Yep.
Which is pretty much the pathway that all of these driver assistance systems are going on. And I think it's an amazing thing, but it also highlights the importance of educating yourself on what you're actually purchasing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it's a buzzword that people hear all the time, a federal safety mandate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's, federally mandated this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And, and especially, and, some people, depending on, their beliefs, sort of, when they hear the term federal mandate, they usually think, oh, the
Yeah.
people telling us what to do, and they kind of become disinterested, some people, but this has a real impact on the safety of, we talk about, it's about the safety of individual people,
Mm-hmm.
but improving the safety of individual people on the road is also going to improve the lives of everyone connected to them,
Yes.
because they won't be losing someone. And so this safety standard, the FMVSS 127, this particular one that we're focused on, is really a milestone for everyday drivers, because it is it is evaluating vehicles on the assumption that they should be able to prevent a collision altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just regulatory noise. It's not just like, oh, it's another government rule or something. It really is changing how cars are going to be marketed, how they're going to be engineered, how they're going to be built, and how they're going, and hopefully how they're going to be used.
Yeah.
Because I think we think kind of, the features first mission is essentially is, the more educated
Mm-hmm.
everyone is, the safer everyone becomes as a driver.
Mm-hmm.
And the old saying of, the rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah.
From like a little kid's toy boat to the largest, shipping vessels,
Mm-hmm.
rising tide raises all boats. That's what this is. It's like the standard of safety on
Mm-hmm.
all vehicles is raising because of this right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And now this is not to be, well, the requirement, the compliance requirement for the manufacturers doesn't kick in till September 1st, 2029. And I mean,
Mhm.
that makes sense. We'll get into that in a second, but it makes sense. There's some strict, strenuous measurements and outcomes that the designers have to create. And so
Mhm.
there's some testing and R&D, and they're going to have to get it right, in order to get that 5-star safety rating and that clearance to be able to put that vehicle out. And so if you think about it, pedestrian fatalities remain one of the most painful data points in road safety. Okay.
Mhm.
77.7% of pedestrian fatalities in 2022 occurred at night. Okay,
Yeah.
so occurred at night. And so that's why FMVSS is specifically targeting that window. There's data tied to why that technology is being created. That's the link that we have to make as the public. There's crash data that's being tied to the technology. And so it's not just a technology that protects the driver. When we talk about distracted driving death, we often picture, right, the driver behind the wheel. But the pedestrian who never saw the car coming they are part of the story as well.
Mhm.
And so that is what this standard is going to be able to protect: pedestrians in the dark. And so it requires that the car must detect and stop for a pedestrian in complete darkness, tested with
Mhm.
only the vehicle's low beam headlights. That's important right there. Low beam headlights at a 100% pass rate at speeds up to 90 miles per hour, which
Yeah.
is really fast. So if you hit somebody at night 90 miles per hour, my goodness. So that is one of the most demanding active safety standards in the world. 100% pass rate.
Mhm.
That's going to take us that's going to take some time.
Yeah,
That's
that's no margin for error right there.
Yeah, yeah, and so I can see some going back and forth, with that, with manufacturing, designing, and the regulations and the rules as well. So this is something, like I said, they have till 2029 to be compliant. So I'm pretty
Right.
sure that the manufacturers are probably going back and saying, "Hey, we need to talk about, this, and make sure that this is actually achievable." Um, but
Mhm.
NHTSA's 2025 regulatory agenda also includes a proposal to extend the compliance deadline. So there's been some chatter about that, with the 2029 date, possible extensions because of the testing requirements. So
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the engineering bar is pretty extraordinary. Nighttime pedestrian detection at speed with 100 pass rate. Technology, there is error. Is error in technology. And we
Mhm.
have all experienced driver assistance systems and provided feedback on how maybe it was a phantom brake. So there are things that happen. There's external environmental things that are outside of our control, fog and snow, all of these things that could affect the cameras, the sensors. And so it'll be interesting to see how this standard continues to roll out, and if any of the requirements are change as they start to test and do R&D. So I would just encourage all the listeners to keep this standard on your radar. Like, pay attention to what is going on with this, and what is the final rule. Even though they have a final rule, but there could be going back and forth since there's been an extension.
Yeah, that extension could make a difference as far as when what cars have this are able to do this and when. And of course, in the meantime, like as we always say, the most important safety feature is to be an attentive driver.
Yeah.
And and I think we would collectively advise not going 90 miles an hour where there could be pedestrians.
Hmm. Hmm.
But again, I know it sounds like, well, it's a very extreme, scenario, but it kind of has to be. That's how you ensure that that something like this can be safe in multiple different conditions.
Correct.
And I mean, the importance of safety with pedestrians in the dark is amazing. I actually had a an instance of this myself. There was no collision, nothing bad actually happened, but it was an amazing example of spotting someone in the dark. And it's a little bit different than what we talked about because this happened actually when I was backing up.
Hmm.
It was very late at night, and where I live, there's almost no street lamps, so it can get very pitch black on this street. So
Yeah.
I was backing out of my driveway, and I have a backup. I've my car's a 2023, so it has backup camera and it has rear cross traffic alert, and the rear cross traffic alert goes off. But
Yeah.
there was no car coming, no headlights. If there was headlights, I would have seen it because it's pitch black otherwise. And rear cross traffic alert goes off, so I stop. Like, what's going on? And about 1.5 seconds later, a cyclist, like in the street,
Wow.
in the street, goes by the backup camera. No lights on the bicycle.
Oh.
No lights on their clothing. No high visibility clothing. I mean, they were wearing basically like black or dark gray, like utterly invisible. And honestly, if it hadn't been for the fact that the backup camera on my car switches to black and white at night for
Mhm.
better visibility, I think if I were just standing outside looking, I don't think I would have seen him. But
Probably
it
not.
it caught it.
Yeah.
Again, not exactly what we're talking about with the forward collision, but still, that was an example of I just thought to
Yes.
myself like, damn, if I had been going faster on a car without that backup camera, I wouldn't have seen him.
And these are, I believe that these are the real practical stories that I think we all have in the car.
Hmm.
We all know that there have been near misses of either not seeing someone or not seeing an object. And so
Exactly.
the technology it really is a co-pilot. I mean, it's there, and it's nice to know that there's regulation behind it, and it's being tested, and there are requirements, because I really do believe that that helps with adoption. That helps with us trusting the technology, because that's the other side of it as well, right? You're getting into this vehicle, and now there's technology that, some of we got active and passive systems. We've talked about this in the past, where you're feeling them moving, or you're feeling them operating as you're driving, versus them kicking in or being triggered if they detect a collision. Very two different user experiences, but it's all requiring your trust. It's all requiring for you to know that if in the event of a collision, that the technology will actually perform what it is supposed to perform. The only way that that can really be solid and sure is if someone has tested it, and then we have that recorded and there's data there,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly, and that's it. It requires a lot of data points to know how these things are behaving,
Yeah.
and then it's important to know that when modern vehicles get serviced, it's important to make sure, and we've touched on like the service aspect of this before,
Oh,
that
yes.
when a modern vehicle gets serviced, that if a component is replaced that has technology in it that allows these systems to work and meet this requirement, the calibration on those has to be done properly so that the replaced part will function exactly as it was intended from the factory.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's something very important I want to mention, because we actually had one of our listeners submit a question kind of along those lines.
Mhm.
We've been fortunate, as we've had throughout the time we've had our podcast going, we've had listeners. We welcome questions from people listening about what we're talking about, because we like to address certain questions or concerns directly. And we had someone write in. They said, my car already has automatic braking, and so does that mean the does that mean it already meets the FMVSS 127, this
Mhm.
this guideline that we've been talking about?
Mhm.
And it's a good question, right? If you have a previous
Right.
a previous generation vehicle, and like it just has automatic braking,
Mhm.
just kind of as like a general umbrella term, does it meet that standard? Well, it could be close, but maybe not 100%. And
Mhm.
so just having it and just having automatic emergency braking of some kind, and specifically meeting this new standard 127, those are two different things.
Mhm.
And as we talked about, the FMVSS 127, this standard is going to be very strenuous, like you said, 100% pass rate under like some of the least ideal conditions. And that there's a lot that goes into that. And as we talked about, automatic emergency braking has been around now for actually many years.
Mhm.
But to the extent that it could meet this standard, a lot of them would not be able to right now, which is why, again, we talk about there might be an extension on the deadline.
Mhm.
We're all going to be staying tuned for that. But as we mentioned, the 100% pass rate is a pretty huge target to reach, but it's an important target to reach for safety. And so that we'll see what happens with the deadline, but just having automatic emergency braking would not necessarily meet that standard. And that's where it's good to, again, just be attentive while driving. That's the
Exactly.
biggest that's the biggest
Exactly.
thing.
There's one thing that you mentioned that I think ties back to the episode we had with Katie Harris, and
Mm.
because NHTSA is mandating that cars stop for pedestrians in the dark, right? So we've said that, but the law
Mhm.
is only as strong as the hands that can maintain the technology.
Yeah.
So that is
I
why.
remember her saying that. Yeah.
Yes, that is why the driver education and the technician training are not separate conversations. They are the same conversation. And Katie Harris showed us that in the season, with the technician shortage and the ADAS repair gap. And so that is why this conversation is urgent. It's all tied together. And so we have expected outcomes, but it's also understanding what needs to happen to really see that full picture. And I'm glad you answered that question like that for the listener, because I don't want people to think that, as you guys start to see these new standards created and new technologies implemented in cars, it doesn't mean that your car is not safe, because you make your car safe, right? Like
Yeah.
you make your car safe. And so you always have the opportunity to look at the cars and look at the type of protection that you're looking for. Look at maybe some of your driving habits that you feel like you could improve on. Maybe you're not the best lane changer, and if that's the
Mhm.
case, you may want to look at a car that has lane keeping assist. Now they even have steering assist, so it's continuously helping you stay into the lane. And so, never feel like your car is not safe, but also, things are becoming better. Vehicles are becoming more advanced, and they are being designed to avoid a collision. And the data is proving that we need help in that area. We need help in that area because we're losing too many people on the road. And so I'm happy that we were able to dive into this, because this is actually one of the most misunderstood standards. There's quite a bit that goes into it from the manufacturing side, but we also need to know about it at the driver's side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think we also get so used to driving at night, especially depending on someone's work schedule or school schedule, they might drive late at night, almost maybe more than during the daytime. Some people have schedules that require that, and I know at certain times when I was in college, I would almost never I would almost exclusively drive home late at night
Yeah,
because, one, because I wouldn't have to sit through heavy traffic later at night, but also just because, staying and studying and, it just resulted in always driving at night. And
yeah,
you get really used to it. And that, my undergrad was 8 years, and, and my that drive to and from college it went from my first car was an 1989 Chevrolet Blazer,
yeah.
then a 2015 Kia Soul, and then a 2014 Toyota Tacoma. And so, there's I've that drive was made a bunch, and you get so used to driving at night
Right.
on sometimes multiple different vehicles that you just forget. It's a lot of people just think, oh, as long as I turn my headlights on, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But we don't realize that us as human beings, because of how our eyes work and how we track
Hmm.
and perceive light and motion,
Hmm.
just how inhibited our window of reaction, our window of opportunity to avoid a collision is reduced at night.
100.
And that's, again, the safe driver thing is so important. That 1989 Chevrolet Blazer that I started with, shock not to shock you too much, it didn't have automatic emergency braking. So, or anything. Nor did it have any ABS or airbags at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Um, but that old 80s SUV in the hands of a safe, attentive driver would be
Oh,
safer than a brand new car driven by someone not paying attention.
yeah. That is, I love that you brought that story in. That is so true. I was actually just speaking to a young teenager who just got their license recently,
Mm,
and they said, what were we doing before backup cameras? Now, yes, we want them to learn how to, back up, parallel park without the camera. They need
of
those
course.
skills. I am not saying that, but I mean, how many times have we backed into things? And so it's so nice to have this backup camera. And they were like, I'm so glad I have my backup camera. I said, I'm glad you have your backup camera too.
Exactly. This is another thing I would say this actually also. I like to give little product specialist pro
Yeah.
tips whenever I can in these things. For any parents watching this, of course, I mean, Lisa, you relate to this even closer than I do.
Mhm,
I'm not married, I don't have kids,
mhm.
but for any parents watching this who might be considering I say a newer car, but like basically maybe their teenage driver's first car,
Yeah.
whether it's a brand new car or not. Especially if you're looking at a pre-owned vehicle, which financially is often a wise choice because of just pricing of them. Pay very close attention to how that car was evaluated safety wise when it was brand new,
Right.
and do some comparisons of how was it evaluated brand new versus how how those safety standards might have changed now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's uh my kind of side note along with that is I would always recommend 2018 or later, because in 2018 backup cameras became federally mandated.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2018 or later, you're guaranteed one. But also, again, this automatic emergency braking thing.
Right.
How do you think there's any chance, there's no way a teenager would ever do this while
Hmm.
driving?
Hmm. There's
We
a
all
reason
do it.
why it's law now.
Exactly. It
There's a
happens to it happens to everyone.
That's
Happens
right.
to it. Happens to it. If any adults are honest with themselves, it happens to everyone. And
A- a-
so
yes.
keep I would really advise parents pay close attention to how automatic emergency braking was evaluated when a
Mhm.
used car was new
Mhm.
versus how it is now. And then if it fits, if financially it fits, if safety wise it works for you, then get it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying don't get an older car, but if there's a discrepancy there of this car would not pass nowadays,
Hmm.
make sure that your teenage driver knows that.
Yeah. Great.
Impress upon them the importance of that, because you're driving an older car. Obviously, you're not meant to stick with this one the rest of your life, but know that it has these safety features, but they are not going to do the whole thing for you.
Right. Absolutely. Great advice. I mean, in my book, what we talked about today, FMVSS 127, it's a milestone, a federal mandate that says your car must stop for a pedestrian in the dark,
Mhm.
100% of the time at highway speed. And so to me, that's extraordinary. And for Distracted Driving Awareness Month, it's the right moment to name it, because
Yeah.
distraction and darkness compound each other, right? The driver looking at their phone, what Luke just said, at night on the highway, right? Because we're doing that changing songs. FMVSS 127 was written for that exact moment. And so
Mhm.
this has been a great deep dive. Don't miss our next episode. Episode 3 will be back in 2 weeks. We already put out the full itinerary. So make sure you come back for episode 3. We're going to be talking about the invisible infrastructure making all of this communication possible. So the
Yeah.
FCC, V2X, and the spectrum, surprise, surprise, spectrum that your car safety systems are already driving on. And so, if today's conversation helped you see ADAS in a new way, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. If you know someone who's shopping for a vehicle, you should share this episode with them.
Mhm.
Subscribe to the Features Talk podcast on YouTube and follow us here on LinkedIn. Drop your questions in the comments because it could be our next listener lane question. And until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and drive safely.
Drive safely. Yep.
See ya.